In the last few videos, we've seen how we can use pivot tables to create very responsive and flexible reports. Uma would now like to be able to present this data graphically. For example, with our first pivot table, she would like to show a pie chart which gives the breakdown of orders by customer type. We can do this using a pivot chart. To create a pivot chart, click somewhere in the pivot table. Come up to your Pivot Table Tools Analyze tab, and in the Tools group, click Pivot Chart. You now need to select your chart type. You can use any of the regular chart types like column, line, pie, or even radar, but you can't use stock, XY scatter, or any of the new and slightly more specialized chart types. That's okay, we just want a pie chart, so I'm going to click pie and press enter. My pie chart has been created. I can move it by clicking and dragging just like I would a normal chart. I can resize it using the resize handles at the corners and midpoints. With my chart selected, you will notice my ribbon has 3 tabs specific to pivot charts. I have my Format tab, Design, and Analyze. The Analyze is very specific to pivot charts. The other 2 look exactly like the regular chart ribbons. So on the Design tab, if I want to, I can add a little bit of styling. I can change my colors, and I can even add a quick layout. So very much like a regular chart. The one big difference, however, is that pivot charts always represent the pivot table. In other words, if I change my pivot table, my chart will change, and vice versa. So let's say, for example, Uma would like to take the consumer customers out of this equation. So she's going to come to her row labels filter, click the drop down, untick consumer, and say OK. Consumer has been removed from the pivot table. It has also been removed from the pivot chart. To clear that filter, I can go back to my table, but I can also clear it from the chart. If you have a look at my legend here, it says customer type and I have a filter button. And when I click on that, I can actually clear filter from customer type. Let's move the chart to the side for a moment and have a look at another example. I would now like to create a line chart which shows my quarterly sales trends for 2015 and 2016. So again, I click somewhere in the pivot table. I come up to my Analyze tab, come to Pivot Chart, and choose Line, and say OK. Okay, that doesn't look great. Let's try and work out why. We had a similar problem in week 4. Our regions are our row labels, and they have been added as axis labels, whereas our year has been added as our legend entries. If you have a look on the right-hand side in our pivot chart fields area, it looks very similar to our pivot table fields area, except instead of column labels, we've got legend series, and instead of row labels, we've got axis. Now what we want to do is swap these around. We could drag and drop very much like we did in our pivot tables, but there's an even quicker method. Instead, we're going to make sure we have our chart selected, come up to our Design tab, and we're going to switch row column data and watch what happens in my pivot chart field list when I do. My legend and my axis values are simply swapped, and my chart now looks really nice. Let's make it match our first chart, so we're going to add a little bit of styling, and we're going to change our colors. Now, because we have a report filter field on this pivot table, we get a report filter field on our chart as well. So if I now decided I just wanted to see the quarterly sales for Anya, I can click my drop down, unselect all, tick Anya, and say OK. And it has now filtered both my table and my chart. Finally, let's take a little look at our Analyze tab. So I'm going to come up to the Analyze tab, and you'll see quite a few features in common with pivot tables. So we have our refresh button, we have a clear button, and on the far right, we also have some options to hide our field list and our field buttons. Field buttons are useful because they allow us to change the chart, but if they start to look unsightly, If you click on it, it now looks like a regular chart. What we're starting to build here is a really nice interactive dashboard that our users can interact with even if they're not that familiar with pivot tables. We just have one more feature we need to look at in the next video, and that is slices.